Hey everyone, today on the plastic canvas we're painting Hazel from Zombie 15. Hey everyone, Maddie from the Plastic Canvas and welcome back to another Zombie 15 Survivor painting video. Today we've got Hazel, and Zombie 15 is a 15-minute co-op real-time survival game where players are trying to meet objectives, moving around really quickly, really fast-paced. And so these minis here all have a particular colour scheme to them, so that on the board they're identified really quickly. Hazel here is our pink character. Just bringing in her card. So there's Hazel there. So yeah, and then you can see her base there is pink as well. So yep, so that's what she's going to end up looking like. So because of the nature of the game, just with how quickly the game's over, how fast everyone's moving around, and how frantic the actual people playing the game are, these minis just don't spend the time on the board for them to be painted to a super high quality, so I'm not going for that with these ones. That doesn't mean that I'm just going to be quickly rushing through them. Still be trying to make them look at least half decent, but just enough to do the job so that on the table they're they look alright, do the job, but most importantly that they're easily identifiable. So there's not going to be too much going on with Hazel. There's no real sort of tricky parts that I can see. Maybe the only thing is just going to be the line work in her stockings. There's sort of a bit of a pink base with some purple rings going around, but yeah, no, nothing too interesting going on. But as usual, while I'm painting, if there's anything that I'm going to stop and share that I've learned along the way, I'll slow it down and have a chat there. But yeah, for the most part, we'll just be getting in. So far, she's been primed. As I've mentioned in a few videos now, I'm still using my brush-on primer that I got back when I started painting about 6 months ago. I did a bit of reading up on primers, spray primers mostly, and yeah, a lot of people were talking about there needing to be particular humidity, temperature, those sorts of things. So there's only possibly certain times of the year, depending on where you live, that you can actually prime, and the fact that you need to do it outdoors to avoid overspray and those sorts of things. But then yeah, there were people mentioning brush-on primers and that you could just sort of do it whenever you want. So I went down that road. So I'll keep using it for a bit, but as I start getting into the next couple of games, which have some bigger minis, I'll be getting a spray-on primer just to do it a bit quicker. But I'm happy with how the brush-on primer goes. So yeah, so primed her, and then she's had a coat or two on the skin. But still needs another coat. Going a skin over black it definitely takes a few coats to do. And with Hazel being like having pinks and a bit of purple, quite light colours. If I sort of had my time again, I'd have a white primer to do it on the black. Just it's going to take a few extra coats to go over the top with, and especially the skin. A white primer would probably only need the 2 coats, but she'll need a third one. But yeah, so just going to get into some painting, get her base coated, and yeah, and we'll go from there. Just while I'm thinking of it, in the last 2 videos, which was Will and Trevor, I swapped over to a new camera, just one that does that has better better resolution, and I can sort of already tell that the focus has been better and just the overall quality's been better. But with Will and Trevor, I wasn't while I was painting, I wasn't aware of how zoomed in I was. When I sort of got it up on the computer and was editing, I sort of realised that I was zoomed in a bit more than what I thought I was. I do have a screen here that I can see as I'm painting. At the time it was looking pretty good. But yeah, then once I got it up on the screen, I could see that it was zoomed in a bit more than what I wanted it to be. So if you've watched those two videos, sorry, I've just tried to zoom out a little bit more with this one. If you've seen them, just let me know in the comments below if you think the zoom in this one's better than that one, just so that I've got a bit of an idea of where to go. From the screen, it's at the moment it's looking better, but yeah, once it gets up on whether you're watching it on like a tablet or TV or on your computer, it can be a little bit different. So yeah, just let me know if you think that the zoom level here is good. And I'll try and keep it at this if you are, or if you think the level in Will and Trevor was better, which was a bit more zoomed in. Yeah, if you preferred that, I'll try and keep it to that. But yeah, just let me know so I can keep making these videos as good as I can be. And yeah, I'll keep going. One thing I'd be really interested to hear from you guys, just in the comments, is your opinion on the different paint brands that are out there. So my starter set that I bought is Reaper, and Reaper are the only paints that I've used so far. But my wife's had a bit of a play around with some painting as well, and being that she loves pink, the first paint that she bought was the Citadel one here, Emperor's Children. So that's the pink that I'm going to use for Hazel. So this is the first time I've used a non-Reaper paint. I have Citadel washes, and nothing to compare them to. So yes, this is my first time using something else. I can already see that the consistency is a little bit different. But yeah, I'd be interested to see what paints you guys prefer, and if you use different types of paints for different applications. So if you're going for particular effects, if you stick with the same types of paints, or if you'll mix it up for doing different things. Stopping there, I don't know if you saw it happen, but just when I came in with the grey there, touched it down and it was pretty thin. It ran down a bit and then just around the bottom of her jacket there, because I've just set up a new wet palette. I've put down a new sheet, put a little bit more water into the sponge, and I think that's just coming through a bit much. Plus I've also got a little bit of drying retarder in there, so she's just the paint's just thinned off a little bit too much there. So what I did just then, the way that I found is a good way to fix that. I've just got some paper towel just off to the side, just sitting just there, and just wipe the brush off a bit on that, just to, even though it took out some of the paint, sucked out some of the water as well, and then I've just sort of gone back and just picked the paint back up, and can see, it's already a better consistency there. So yeah, just getting some of the water out of the bristles just seems to help with that. As does not making your paint too thin in the first place. we go. So Hazel's gotten her base coat done now. She's got a couple of little extra things to go, like the purple hoops around her stockings, a couple of little buckles and those sorts of things. But before I do those things, I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting and shading after she's had a proper dry, and then those things will go over the top. I didn't do any talking during that because I wanted to try and do a longer stretch of painting without having it been so start-stop like some of the previous videos have been, just to sort of see which sort of works a bit better, whether stopping during painting to talk about different things is better, or if it's better to sort of leave it to the end, just do a solid bit of painting and then go back and mention those different things. So I've mentioned in a couple of videos the two things that I've really been focusing on with my time painting so far, which has been around about 6 or so months on and off, is paint consistency and brush control. So with the consistency, just, not too thick that it sort of globs and takes away the detail, but they're not too thin that it sort of runs everywhere, but still being smooth. And then with the brush control, just basically putting the paint where I want it to go. And the reason why I've sort of really tried to focus on those two things is because I sort of figure that all other techniques are going to start with them as a bit of a base. Whether it's wet blending, OSL, highlighting, whatever, to do those effectively, you need to have your paints to the right consistency and to be able to have control over your brush. So while I'm working on, highlighting from one model to another, and, different techniques, the ones that I'm really trying to get right are just those two things, paint consistency, brush control. Been happy with the brushwork on this one, like a guitar strap there, sort of managed to get that fine line going around. That sort of went where I wanted it to go, but the paint consistency was definitely on the thin side. There were a couple of points in there where it ran to a spot that I didn't want it to, so just needed to let it dry and then go back and fix it up. So I had a couple of spots just on my palette where I dropped another separate drop of paint to work from, and just started it again. I think just because I set up a new wet palette, like a new sheet, I had probably a bit too much water in that, so it was just straight off the bat, it was too thin, so just scrap that, and then just did new drops of paint, rather than trying to sort of keep pushing through, just some new paint. So yes, I wasn't happy with the consistency, and probably should have picked up on that straight away. But that's okay. That's a thing to look for next time. But yeah, so I just dropped in more paint and like in a separate pool, not in the pool that I already had, and just worked from there. And that was sort of all right from there. So yes, I'm just going to give her a good chance to dry now before I come back and do any more. But yep, happy with where she's at. I don't think there was really much else while I was actually painting that I wanted to mention in there. I suppose in terms of like the order in which I painted her, again, this is something that I've mentioned in the videos, but not sort of knowing whether you guys have seen the ones that I've already painted or not is a little hard to tell what things to keep talking about and which things that I sort of assume that you've already heard me talking about. But so the order in which I paint things in, so which part I paint first, second, third, so on. Just working in, everyone calls it the same thing, just inside out. So starting with the lowest layer of the mini and then working up. So anytime it's a person, it's always the skin first because it's the lowest layer. Everything goes over the top of that. And then just working on the next layer, then the next layer, then the next layer, and working till that final layer, the one that is the highest layer that sort of goes over the top of everything else. And a way that I've sort of found has made it easy to work out how to go about that is just imagining yourself as the mini, and then in what order you would get dressed. So one of the first things that I started with was her stockings, because then her boots go over the top of the stockings and her shorts go over the top of that. So yeah, start with the lowest layer, then go the next ones over, because if a bit of the paint from her stockings was to go over the boots, that would stand out quite a bit because her boots go over the top of her stockings. But if some of the paint from her boots goes a little bit too far up her stockings, it doesn't stand out as much because her boots are supposed to be going over the top. So it sort of makes a little bit more sense. Same thing with her shorts over the top of the stockings. There are a couple of points in there where I didn't sort of strictly stick to that rule, like I did her gloves, for example, before the strap on her guitar. In that case, I just purely forgot about the strap. I was sort of having a look over, and then I noticed just this funny little detail that was down in here where the strap is, and I was thinking, oh, that's her, like that was the edge of her jacket. I thought, I stopped her jacket up too high, but then realised, oh no, actually that's the strap of the guitar, and then looked back at the her card, and yeah, so worked that out. So so there's a couple of spots where I didn't strictly stick to that, but for the most part, it's just start with the lowest layer and then just work up from there until you get to that layer that's sort of over the top of everything else. You obviously get some interesting spots, like with her hair, for example. You can see her like her hair is tucking in behind the collar of her jacket. But because of a couple of different spots, I ended up painting her jacket before her hair. I'm actually trying to think of what that was, and I think I might have just simply overlooked that and just painted that so I could have done the hair before the jacket. Maybe. Probably. But anyway, there was a spot where I needed to touch up along the top of the collar, but that's okay. So yeah, there really wasn't sort of much else that I wanted to stop and talk about there. That's just sort of at a bit of a spot where I'm going to leave that for a bit to dry. Okay, camera decided to stop filming there, that's okay. But yeah, so I'll come back and finish off some highlighting, and then just those finishing touches. And then she'll be well on the way. So again, these minis just aren't on the table for very long, so it just doesn't need to be a super high quality, and I think I've done this with each of them so far, but like if I grab this bottle here, which is a half-ounce bottle, and then put it next to the mini, you can see how small she is. So her in the middle of the table, all these finer details, they just don't stand out that much. Whereas... if I bring in like here's the Beast from Spectre Ops, you can see the scale difference there, and even the Beast isn't that big in terms of minis across the whole hobby. So a lot more has gone into him. Whereas Hazel, not that big. So it's just kind of thinking about what level of effort and finish needs to go in to get the to sort of get that output, I suppose. Just is spending 2 hours going over those finishing touches actually going to be worth it in the end when you think that she's going to be right in the middle of the table, everyone's going to be sitting around the edge, and it's just not. So so she's coming along. Leave her for a bit, and we'll come back and do her finishing touches. Alright, so last night, which was about 3 seconds ago for you guys, finished base coating Hazel, and now we're just ready to get on to some basic highlighting and some finishing touches, just to get her done. So if you've been watching these videos, I'll be sounding like a broken record at this point, but with the amount of time that these minis spend on the table and how closely they're looked at, it's in terms of payout versus reward sort of thing, it's just not worth investing too much time in these guys to get like a high quality finish, because it's just not going to be worth it. So I'm just going to be doing some basic stuff just to add a little bit of depth, a little bit of definition, but yeah, pretty simple stuff. So going to be adding a bit of highlighting to her legs, up on her shirt, still wash on her hair just to bring out some of the detail. I was thinking after I finished last night, I painted this little kind of like an anarchist sort of symbol on the back of her shirt there. There's a raised section there, so I've just painted over that, so that's supposed to be there. But by the time I do some highlighting, I'm going to be going over the top of that. So little things like that I could have left till the end because I'm going to be repainting that. But kind of like how I haven't painted the purple hoops on her stockings there, just because by the time I do the highlighting, that'll just go over the top. So those will be those last little touches. So yeah, just going to do some pretty simple highlighting. Yeah, wash on her hair just to bring out some detail and add some depth, and yeah, then do the blood effect at the end, and then she'll be done. So just going to get into that. So just as I get into it, I've had a couple of different goes at, tried a couple of different ways of doing some highlighting. And the way that I found sort of recently that's worked, that I found to be the easiest way to highlight is to start where, you know, the light's going to be hitting. So I'm going to be sort of doing like the outsides of her legs. Just with a slightly lighter shade than the base coat. So I've taken the pink, so Emperor's Children, just mixed in a tiny bit of white just to lighten it a bit. Then I'm going to start on the outside of her leg, basically just doing a line, and then there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can either wash the paint off with your brush, or you can do the awful habit like what I've gotten into, where you just quickly lick the brush, which just sort of knocks off the excess paint, wets the bristles a little bit, and then just feather it away from the light point towards where the shadows will be, just to get a bit of a gradual, bring it back in, just a bit of a gradual gradient there. Then lighten the paint a little bit more, do the same thing, start at that same point, but don't feather it out quite as far. Then lighten it again, and then just keep repeating that. So every time you lighten it, you just don't feather it out quite as far, until you've got the desired sort of highlight, I suppose, where most of the light's going to be hitting. So there's lots and lots of different ways you can do it, lots of videos out there. Make sure you do go and check them out. But for me, this has been a way that I found that sort of works fairly easily. Oh, well, not necessarily easily, but like every technique, you need to work at it a bit, but it's at least working for me at the moment. So that's how I'm going to do her legs, and it'll be the same approach for her jacket as well. So starting with that same purple base coat, but just lightening it a touch, and then starting where the light's going to be hitting, and then just feathering it out from there, and then lightening a bit more, and then just not feathering as far each time, just to give that gradual gradient, rather than trying to create 20 different shades and just gradually building it up, just feathering it out so that it's just that gradual gradient. So yeah, so we're going to get into this, see how we go. Hopefully I'm going to be thinking a little bit more about my paint consistency than last time, because that was all over the show. So yeah, so we'll see how we go. If you get a little spot, well, at least this is sort of like what I had here, where I went a little bit too light from one layer to another, and then so you end up with, as you feather it out, you kind of end up with a line to show where one layer has ended and the other one's starting. All I did there, like for instance, along the back of her leg here, I had a light pink line running down there where it wasn't quite feathered out properly. So all I did was just got a little bit of the base coat, just a tiny bit, to basically use as a bit of a just to bring in a little bit more paint to let me wet blend the highlight into the base coat a little bit more. So rather than trying to keep feathering out because I didn't actually want it to go any further, just brought in that extra little bit of the base coat, and that helped just blend that the lighter pink line out. And you can see just from the literal 2 or 3 minutes that I've spent doing that, if you look at the outside of her leg there, just as it comes around to the inside, and sort of gives a bit of that just that effect of the light hitting the outside there. And then if you look on the outside of this leg, you don't get that effect. So you can see that just what that pretty simply what that's done. And that's basically just the premise that I'm going with. So yeah, just slightly lightening off the paint, start on the point where the light's going to be hitting, feathering out from there, and then lighten it a little bit more, again down the point where the light's going to be hitting it, but just don't feather quite as far, and then just keep repeating that process until you've gotten it to the brightness that you're happy with. I think just for contrast I might go a little bit lighter, because if you one thing I did notice early on with my painting was how much I needed to up the contrast, because if you think as you're painting, you've got these pretty close in front of you, and you can see all those little gradients and things like that and all your little highlights. But by the time it's then sitting in the middle of the table and there's other things around it and everyone's sitting a good metre away from it, all that detail goes away. So you really need to push the contrast so that from that distance it gets seen. It's just something to keep in mind. So sometimes the way that it looks up close might not look quite right, but by the time it's back in the middle of the table, it's looking better. So I'm going to keep going, just building up this contrast, and then I'm going to do the same thing down the other side of her leg. I thought just as one thing that might just be a little bit helpful, there's the paint that I've used for the highlighting there, just on her leg. So this is the base coat over here, and then as I've been mixing white in, I've just been moving along so that I keep the different gradients of paint, so that if in a case like here where I needed to go back and again just I up the contrast a bit too much from one layer to another and I needed to feather it out, I've got that colour sitting back here that I can use to match the previous layer to help me blend them together. So if you just sort of if for example I just kept lightening just the base coat up and up and up and up and up, I don't have a way to go back. So if you keep, take some from here, put it there, mix in a bit of white, and then just keep moving along, just keep spreading it out, you've got that gradient. So that's a way that's definitely helped me. So yep, so I'm sort of happy with the contrast going on there. Do the same thing on the other side. Just quickly, in a little case like here on the bottom of her shirt where I hadn't actually noticed, but there are actually like moulded into it slight sort of folds in her clothes. I ran like a lighter grey along like the ridge of each of those those folds, and then did the same sort of process, feathered it out. But then the next time, and depending on, it'd be a case by case as to how many times you feather it out and how bright you want to take it. But just in this case, then the next one was just with the same highlighting color that I feathered out. It was then just a line just to make the ridge of the clothes. Didn't need any more than that, but I just thought I'd stop on that point there. Just that, yeah, like it's not always just keep lightening and feathering. Sometimes you might want to create that sharper line, but you still want to feather it out towards the shadow rather than just making a line and calling it quits there. So that's all coming along all right. So I'm just going to get on to do her jacket now. I hope I didn't take it out of shot there, because as I looked up at the screen I noticed I had Hazel up there a bit too far. Just when I was doing the highlight just on the edge of her jacket there, like on this side, I just used the same technique where I just started on where I thought the light would be hitting, which was sort of this corner, and then worked away from, always working away from where the light's hitting, and then I finished with a very, very thin, almost white line there just to build that contrast. And I thought on this edge here, there's probably not really going to be any light going in under her arm there, so I just did a little edge highlight just on the edge of her jacket there. And the way that I did that, and I've just gotten this off videos that I've been watching, rather than trying to actually paint with the tip and trying to paint, if I sort of get the angle right there, rather than just trying to paint that line, work at 90 degrees to it, and use not the tip but the side of the bristles, and just run it along, because that way it's only going to catch the actual edge, whereas if you're working this way and with the tip can, done it again, if you try and run down like that, the tip or the bristles can roll around the edge, and then it's going to roll down the side and you won't get that sharp edge. So if you just, paint on your bristles as normal, then try and run the edge of it along rather than painting in the direction of it, just helps to get that fine line. So just in terms of that amount of shading or highlighting that's happened there, I'm pretty well happy with that. I might actually give a little bit of highlighting to her guitar there. I've got no real artwork to work off for it. I've done what I could sort of see, like this little bit of metal on there, the straps running around. I might just highlight just the top of it a little bit, but not going to do too much there. And then give her hair a little wash just so it's not quite so bright. Bring out some of the detail. Then paint the stripes around her stockings. I might actually highlight her boots a little bit there. They're looking at a card there. They're all pretty dark, so I won't bother too much. And then then the blood effect, and then she'll be done. just quickly, I've mentioned this in another couple of the videos where I've done some final lines like this. Back when, like, I first started painting, if I had any sort of fine line work to do, I used to sort of take the approach of trying to sort of do it all in one go. But the problem with that is that if you've got the amount of the amount of paint in your bristles to be able to do the line in one go, it can easily run, or you can put too much in one spot, or as you then get towards the end, you might need to start pressing a little bit harder with the bristles to keep the paint coming out, and then you're going to end up spreading it out. So what I do now is just get a little bit of a little bit of paint just on the tip of the bristles, and then just do a bit of the line. Then get some more paint, got it right that time, get some more paint on the tip of your bristles, and then just do a little bit more of the line, and then just keep working your way around. So lots of short lines rather than one long one, because at least for me, when I was doing it, I found that I was spreading the line too much, because maybe it was too much paint, or because I then had to press a bit harder to actually get the paint to be coming off. So yeah, definitely recommend just a little bit of paint on the tip, and yeah, do more lines rather than fewer. So just before I go into doing the blood on her, which is actually off her player card, is very, very minimal. I think she still needs some. Just a quick couple of things I wanted to mention, because I'm probably not going to really stop between now and the end. If you want to sort of see how I've gone about doing the blood, I've broken that down in some of the other videos, so you can check them out in the other Zombie 15 videos. But it should hopefully be from what you see me doing pretty self-explanatory. The main thing is just, at least for me, is mixing in a little bit of brown with the red paint, just to knock that vibrancy off, because like being a zombie game, the blood's gonna, it's not always going to be fresh, so that just makes it look a bit less like they've had a literal fight with red paint. Just makes it look a little bit more the way that it should. And then with her base, it's just going to be painted pink, like the others have been painted their sort of theme colour, just so that she's really, really easily recognised. So those are the steps that I'll be doing for the rest of the video, so I don't think I'll really have a need to stop and mention anything while doing them. I did make one, just a, thing that if you're painting off a card, do check the card properly, because sometimes you can make things easier for yourself. When I was painting all those lines on there, I got a bit carried away. Didn't realise that around the edge of her stockings, there's 5 thick purple lines on her stockings. Yeah, I've got a few more than 5 there. I did it way too thin. Noticed a little bit too late, thought, okay, so gave myself a little bit more work, but that's okay. But one thing I was thinking of, then it reminded me, back when I sort of started painting, and I sort of mentioned when I started painting, it was only a few months ago. One thing I was sort of noticing about the minis that I was painting was that, and in terms of the paint that I was putting on, was that they were just looking a bit flat in terms of the colours, and not flat as in like highlighting and shading, but flat as in just too much of a particular colour. And as I got into a couple of games that had the player cards with the artwork on there, and I started to work off of them, I noticed that as the colours got broken up more and more, I didn't notice them looking quite as flat. So, don't know if I've just got a couple of minis off to the side that that I did paint back near the start. No, none of the ones that I was thinking of that I painted really early, but like the first game that I painted was Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu, and the characters that you can play in there, the very first one that I did was a guy with a brown trench coat. He's got grey pants on, and I mean I sort of painted it the way that it, like, I think is right, but there's not a lot of visual interest there. It is a lot of just big slabs of colour. I mean, the minis are quite small, but yeah, just slabs of colour. And that was sort of going on with Hazel a little bit before I painted the purple stripes around her stockings, because you just had these just solid bits of colour. And that's fine, but I've definitely found that as that, to a point, the more the colour gets broken up, the better it does end up looking. I got a friend that painted some orcs from Arcadia Quest, and on those orcs they've got little skulls around like the swords and around their belts and things like that, and they hadn't painted them in, and so I sort of made that suggestion and I did a few of them, and when you compared the ones that had those skulls painted in, which just added just that extra colour here and there, broke up some of the browns and the greens, it was amazing how much better the ones looked that had the skulls compared to the ones that didn't. And it was absolutely nothing to do with the quality of painting or anything like that, because I painted none of them except for the skulls. It was purely just by breaking it up that little bit more with, and it was just an off-white bone colour, that's all it was. It wasn't anything fancy, but just by adding that extra little colour in, just to break it up that little bit more, really did a lot for the mini. So, yeah, if you find that you're looking at your minis thinking, geez, they're just looking a bit flat, they're just missing something, that could be what it is. It might just be that you need to work in an extra colour somewhere. Maybe, they might have a belt on. It can be something as simple as that. Just mix up the colour with the belt just to break it up a little bit. Or, like, I mean, I've gone off her artwork, but just things like, those purple stripes on her stockings just breaks it up that little bit more and adds a little bit more interest. So, yeah, that's definitely a way that I found has helped my minis not look quite so flat, for lack of a better word, is just breaking it up with a little bit more colour. And like the example from the Arcadia Quest orcs, it doesn't need to be much. It can just be something as simple as those tiny skulls. Did a surprising amount for them. So yeah, I kind of talked a little bit about that there just to give those last little bits that I did there a bit of time to dry. Now that they're done, get in, do the blood, paint a base, and that'll be another Zombie 15 Survivor done. Said I wasn't going to stop, but I had to. Mentioned this as well in another couple of videos as I was painting the blood, but one thing that sort of one thing I found that helps me to sort of direct certain things that I'm painting, and in particular something like blood, is to try and tell a little bit of a story with the character, and to think about in the game what they're actually going to be doing. And so that's helped a bit with the blood, because if I bring in like Vance here, who's got his machetes, you know, if he's up in the zombie's face, hacking them to pieces, he's going to have quite a bit of blood on him because it's going to be spraying around. Whereas if you have someone like Trevor here, who's got his shotgun, I mean, he's a little bit ranged, so he's not going to have as much as Vance, but he's still got a little bit on there because it's going to be spraying around a bit. But then if I bring in like Severity, who's just got her pistols, she's got very, very little blood on her because she's mostly ranged. And that just sort of helps direct a little bit of, you know, it's just certain aspects of what I do. So then like when putting on the blood, if you're thinking, well, you know, maybe she uses her guitar to bash them over the head, there's probably going to be a bit of blood like around this end of the guitar, whereas not so much this end, which is going to be hanging onto it. So it just sort of helps certain things sort of end up looking right, because it's sort of thought about what they're actually going to be doing, what they'll actually look like after doing, you know, whatever it is that they do. So yeah, just a quick little thing that I just wanted to add in there. Because, yeah, something like blood, I mean, it's very easy to sort of get carried away and just put it everywhere, and before you know it, it's just way over the top, and it loses the effect because, you know, it just looks silly. Whereas if it's just sort of used just to add the right effects, there we are. So that's sort of giving her a bit of a look that she's been in a couple of fights, and you can sort of tell that the way that she's been fighting, because the blood's sort of concentrated in the spots that I feel that it should be. Yeah, just helps to sell the idea. Alright, so since the last part of the video there where I was painting up her base, I've gone ahead and done a second coat on there, but like the other videos, I haven't included that for you guys, just don't really need to see that, seeing as you saw me put the first coat on, and so that means that we can call Hazel done. Always try and finish off with a base, kind of like, you know, in a painting, putting your signature down. Try not to do anything after that. So yeah, so that's Zombie 15 Survivor number 6 finished. Another one ready to face the Horde. So, as usual, thanks very much for sticking around, watching me paint, and I hope you've picked something up that you can use in your own painting, or yeah, just at the very least, you've just enjoyed watching me paint. As usual, please leave a comment down below, something that you enjoyed, something that you think can be improved, just as I'm always trying to make these videos as good for you guys as possible, and I can only do that with your feedback. So yeah, so please leave a comment below, something that you like, something that you think can be improved, and if you've been enjoying watching these, please hit the like and subscribe so that you can keep up to date with when they come out, and just so I know that you guys are enjoying these videos. So yeah, thanks for sticking around. Happy painting, everyone, and this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Cheers.